Donald Trump thought he could bluff, bark, and bully his way into rewriting the trade rules with Canada. He thought slapping a devastating 35% tariff on Canadian exports, one of the highest tariffs levied by any developed nation in the world, would send Canada scrambling to the negotiation table. He thought that by turning the screws on cross-border trade, he could force Canada to bow to his ego, his political agenda, and his America First illusion. But what happened instead? Canada stood up, not with a megaphone, not with rage, but with a clear-eyed, unshakable message: we will not be intimidated. And that message came not just from the streets or the pundits, but from the very top, with Prime Minister Mark Carney at the helm. Calm, deliberate, and unflinching, Carney responded to Trump's economic aggression not with panic or retaliation, but with principle. And in doing so, he made it clear that the era of Canadian deference to Washington is over. That's right. The Canada of 2025 isn't the same country Trump tried to push around in 2018. This is a Canada forged by economic pressure, global realignment, and the scars of past trade disputes. And this time it's ready. Let's be perfectly clear. Trump's 35% tariff isn't just bad policy. It's a diplomatic middle finger. It's punitive. It's provocative. It's designed not to solve a problem, but to manufacture one. From the very beginning, Trump's approach to international relations has been less about negotiation and more about coercion. Whether it's Mexico, China, or now Canada, Trump treats trade like a mob boss treats protection money. Pay up, shut up, or get hurt. But Canada doesn't operate under fear. And Carney made that known immediately. Instead of escalating recklessly, Carney used a moment to draw a hard line around Canadian sovereignty. We will not sacrifice our principles to satisfy foreign political agendas, was a message from Ottawa. And behind closed doors, the strategy was simple: remain steady, protect Canadian values, and reinforce alliances outside of Trump's influence. Carney didn't stoop to Trump's theatrics. He didn't waste time on Twitter spats or press conference drama. He mobilized trade ministers. He secured European partnerships. He deepened Asian cooperation. He reinforced economic resilience. And while Trump raged about unfair trade deals, Carney quietly showed the world what leadership under pressure really looks like. And let's talk about pressure. Because make no mistake, Trump's tariff didn't just hurt Canada. It hurt the U.S. too. Border towns across America are already feeling the sting. Canadian tourists, many of whom fueled small businesses and retail sectors, have stopped crossing. Canadian consumers are boycotting U.S. products. Trucking routes have been disrupted. Costs are rising on both sides of the line. What Trump doesn't understand, or doesn't care about, is that this relationship cuts both ways. His so-called punishment of Canada has boomeranged straight back into his own economy, and the damage is mounting. Meanwhile, in Canada, the narrative isn't collapse, it's resolve. Carney's government has weathered the initial economic shock, rolling out support programs for affected industries, streamlining interprovincial trade to reduce bottlenecks, and deepening investment in infrastructure that bypasses U.S. choke points. At the center of it all is a commitment to not yield. This is where values matter. Trump is betting that if he makes the pain big enough, Canada will cave on tariffs, on drug pricing, on foreign policy. But Canada isn't caving. It's innovating, adapting, reinforcing its identity. Let's not forget what's truly at stake here. This isn't just a trade dispute. This is an attack on sovereignty. When Trump tried to use trade to influence Canada's foreign policy, pushing Ottawa to fall in line with his chaotic international agenda, it wasn't just insulting. It was a threat to democratic independence, a threat to human rights commitments, a threat to Canada's long-standing position as a nation of peacekeeping, diplomacy, and fairness. Carney, unlike his American counterpart, didn't lash out. He didn't get personal. He got principled. Canada will not be bullied into betraying its values. Trump's silence toward Carney, his refusal to even engage in direct communication, says everything. He didn't just impose a tariff. He snubbed a nation. His lack of basic diplomatic courtesy, refusing calls, dodging meetings, sending lower-level officials to relay ultimatums, wasn't a sign of strength. It was a sign of cowardice. And Carney's response? Dignity, measured strength, no groveling. No games, just action. And that quiet defiance is now being recognized around the world as a model for standing up to tyranny without losing your soul. And while Canada held its line, it also hit back in strategic, focused ways. Counter-tariffs were implemented not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. U.S. goods that once flooded Canadian markets now face roadblocks. Canadian industries that once relied on the American market are diversifying fast, and it's working. Carney isn't playing Trump's game. He's changing the board. And now, Washington is scrambling to keep up. Let's also talk about the impact on Canadian healthcare. One of Trump's lesser-known goals in this trade war is to pressure Canada into changing its drug pricing system. Why? Because Americans are crossing the border to get life-saving medications for a fraction of the cost. Instead of fixing the broken American healthcare system, Trump wants Canada to raise its prices. It's grotesque. It's backwards. And once again, Carney said no. Canada is not going to dismantle universal health care to make Trump look good, period. The contrast couldn't be more striking. On one side, you have a leader like Carney, calm, competent, rooted in facts, grounded in values. On the other, you have Trump, erratic, vengeful, obsessed with optics, uninterested in substance. Trump views foreign leaders as either servants or enemies. There's no in-between. But Carney isn't playing that game. He's offering a new model, leadership without capitulation, diplomacy without desperation. And the world is taking notice, because this isn't just Canada's fight. It's a global one. Countries around the world are watching closely, watching how a mid-sized nation like Canada can stand its ground against the world's largest economy, watching how principles can still matter in a world dominated by autocrats and strongmen, watching how democracy defends itself, not with bombs or bluster, but with backbone. Carney's resistance isn't just national, it's symbolic. It's a warning shot to every leader who thinks intimidation is a strategy. And yes, the challenges are real. Canadian businesses are facing higher costs. Border delays are creating uncertainty. Supply chains are being rerouted in real time. But unlike Trump, who creates crisis and then feeds on the chaos, Carney is using this pressure to build something stronger. This isn't survival. It's evolution. The economy is adapting. The political culture is hardening. And a new era of Canadian assertiveness is being born, not in anger, but in dignity. Trump's tantrum has backfired. His attempt to punish Canada has only strengthened it. And now, instead of caving, Canada is emerging as a beacon of independent democratic strength. That's the irony of Trump's entire approach. The more he pushes, the more he proves Canada's resolve. The more he tries to fracture the alliance, the more unified Canadians become around the idea that we don't need to bow to bullies to be heard. This isn't just about tariffs. It's about who gets to dictate terms in a world teetering between democracy and authoritarianism. It's about whether nations like Canada can stay true to their values without paying the price for defiance. And right now, Canada is proving that you can, that a nation can take the economic hit, absorb the political pressure, and still stand tall. That strength isn't just in numbers, it's in principles. So as Trump rages from his podium, shouting about betrayal and punishment, as his administration flailed for traction in a fight they thought would be over in weeks, Canada remained steady, unmoved, clear in its purpose. Mark Carney didn't respond with fury. He responded with strength. And in doing so, he delivered a message not just to Trump, but to every authoritarian-leaning leader around the globe. Canada is not your puppet, and we will not bend. Canada's defiance in the face of Trump's economic onslaught is more than a moment. It's a movement, a shift in the global perception of what Canadian leadership looks like. For decades, Canada was cast as a quiet neighbor, the cooperative ally, the polite diplomat at the international table. But now, that image is being replaced by something far more powerful, a sovereign, principled, and unyielding force that will not trade its value for convenience. The Trump tariff war didn't expose Canadian weakness. It exposed Canadian strength, a different kind of strength, the kind that refuses to bend just to appease a man-child president lashing out because he can't get his way. And let's be honest, this wasn't about trade. It never is with Trump. This was about control, domination. He saw Canada's independent drug pricing policies, its global human rights stance, its refusal to be complicit in his foreign policy disasters, and he wanted to punish that independence. He wanted to prove that no ally could disobey him without consequences. He thought the economic pressure would force Canada to fold, to compromise, to fall in line. But instead, he encountered something he couldn't bully: national character. Canada's countermeasures, though limited and targeted, were carefully crafted. Carney didn't throw gasoline on the fire. He used economic precision. U.S. industries that were dependent on cross-border flow, agriculture, retail, pharmaceuticals, found themselves suddenly exposed. A cross-border relationship that once moved with ease became mired in uncertainty. And the irony? Much of the American business community didn't even support Trump's tariffs. They warned against them. They lobbied against them. But Trump, driven by vanity and his relentless need to appear strong, ignored the advice of economists, diplomats, and even his own trade advisors. He chose optics over outcomes. And now, the consequences are undeniable. Canadian consumers began shifting their dollars. Immediately, Made in USA labels disappeared from shelves. Travel to American border towns plummeted. Industries that thrived on Canadian shoppers, from Buffalo to Bellingham, started reporting double-digit revenue losses. And yet, Trump kept beating the same broken drum, shouting about winning and fairness, while American small businesses paid the price for his delusions. And back in Canada, something extraordinary began to take root: a new kind of national pride. For the first time in years, Canadians were united by something more than political identity. They were united by principle, by the idea that they would not be dictated to by a foreign president with no respect for diplomacy, facts, or shared values. And Mark Carney, though never flashy, rose to that moment. His government didn't feed the chaos. It steadied the ship. And in doing so, it restored a sense of collective dignity. Canada wasn't going to shout or rage. It was going to endure, and then outmaneuver. And that's exactly what's happening. Carney is building new supply chains, faster than anyone expected. Agreements with European nations are being accelerated. Infrastructure funding for ports and east-west transport corridors is on the rise. Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises, once relying on the U.S. for volume, are now finding new customers abroad. And Carney's message to the world is clear: Canada is open for business, just not on its knees. But while Canada recalibrates, the U.S. is stumbling. Trump's obsession with punishment over partnership has left his country isolated. And not just diplomatically, economically, too. Allies are wary. Markets are jittery. Long-standing trade relationships are being scrutinized. And all because one man believes that loyalty should come at the cost of sovereignty. But the truth? Real allies don't demand submission. They earn trust. Trump has forgotten that, if he ever understood it to begin with, and the internal chaos in the U.S. only makes things worse. As Trump spends his days rage posting about Canada, domestic problems are exploding. Infrastructure is crumbling. Inflation is rising. Healthcare is more unaffordable than ever. And instead of solving those issues, Trump is busy picking fights with a country that has been historically one of America's most dependable partners. Why? Because in Trump's worldview, there are only two types of countries: winners and losers. He doesn't understand equality. He doesn't respect independence. And when faced with a nation like Canada that refuses to roll over, he lashes out like a spoiled child denied dessert. But this moment has also awakened something else: a global realignment. Countries that once saw the U.S. as the ultimate trade guarantor are now watching Canada's response with admiration. They're asking themselves, if Canada can say no and survive, maybe we can too. Maybe it's time to stop treating U.S. policy swings like natural disasters we just have to live with. Maybe it's time to build systems that are more resilient, more diverse, and less dependent on the mood swings of the Oval Office. And that shift, that subtle recalibration of global loyalty, that's a seismic win for Canada. It also proves that values and strategy aren't mutually exclusive. Canada is not just standing up to Trump for the sake of pride. It's doing so because it's good policy. Letting a bully define your economic path is not sustainable. Letting a foreign government dictate your domestic values is not sovereignty, it's submission. And Carney knows it. That's why his administration is prioritizing economic diversification, trade expansion, and national resilience. Because in a world where autocrats are rising and democracies are under threat, Canada's best defense is independence. And while we're on the subject of democracy, let's talk about how this moment has exposed the stark differences in leadership. Trump has no regard for institutions, no respect for process, no patience for diplomacy. His administration lurches from one self-inflicted crisis to the next, leaving allies burned and enemies emboldened. Carney, by contrast, is the embodiment of stability. He doesn't chase headlines. He builds frameworks. And while that may not light up cable news, it builds something far more important: trust. That trust is now Canada's most valuable asset. Nations around the world are looking at Ottawa and seeing a reliable partner, one that honors agreements, values human rights, and won't turn on them because of a tweet. That's how soft power is built. That's how influence spreads. And it's happening precisely because Canada refused to cave. This isn't just an economic inflection point. It's a political and cultural one, too. Canadians are rediscovering what it means to be resilient, to be strategic, to be unshakable in the face of reckless power. And make no mistake, this is only the beginning. The longer Trump's tariffs remain, the more irreversible the changes become. Canada's economy is already pivoting. New partnerships are being forged that won't be undone just because a different president takes office someday. Trump thought he could scare Canada into submission. What he did instead was push it toward evolution. And as for Trump's legacy in all this, it's already written. He'll be remembered as a president who tried to weaponize trade against an ally and failed, who underestimated Canadian resolve, who mistook politeness for weakness, and who once again turned America's greatest strengths into vulnerabilities through sheer narcissism. Meanwhile, Carney's legacy is still unfolding. But one thing is clear. He met the challenge with clarity, courage, and conviction. He didn't bow. He didn't bluster. He led. And in doing so, he reminded Canadians and the world that you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to retaliate to resist. You just have to know who you are and be willing to stand by it, no matter who tries to knock you down. So where does this leave us? In a world that feels more unstable by the day, Canada has emerged as a rare source of calm, deliberate power, a country that will protect its values, defend its people, and hold the line even when the pressure mounts. And all of it, every bit, because a president mistook integrity for weakness and got a lesson in what real leadership looks like. Trump rages. Carney responds. And the world watches as Canada stands tall. And as Canada stands tall, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Trump's approach is chaotic, theatrical, and driven by insecurity masquerading as strength. Carney's approach is methodical, principled, and rooted in confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't need to roar to be felt. And that quiet power is reshaping the way nations navigate conflict in a deeply unstable world. Because Carney didn't just protect Canada from an economic ambush. He redefined what resilience looks like in the face of coercion. Trump underestimated the Canadian people. He assumed that pressure would fracture unity, that hardship would lead to compromise. But instead, he triggered something stronger, a national reaffirmation. From Vancouver to Halifax, Canadians rallied around the idea that sovereignty isn't for sale. They embraced sacrifice for the sake of principle. They saw their leadership take a stand, not for political gain, but for the future of the country. And in that stand, they found solidarity. Now, with the dust starting to settle, Trump is the one on the defensive. His administration is scrambling to manage the economic fallout. His allies in Congress are being lobbied by angry businesses, furious farmers, and frustrated border communities. And yet Trump, incapable of admitting failure, keeps doubling down. It's the same playbook he's used for years. Deflect, deny, distract. But this time, it's not working. Because this time, his target didn't flinch. Mark Carney showed the world that leadership isn't about intimidation. It's about integrity. And as Canada moves forward stronger and more independent than ever, the lesson for the world is clear. When bullies come knocking, you don't always need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes, All it takes is standing your ground and refusing to move. Canada did just that, and it changed everything.